Welcome to the Inspired Hygiene Podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Wall. I'm an RDH and founder of Inspired Hygiene. For over 20 years, we've had the unique opportunity to see what really happens inside thousands of dental hygiene ops and what it takes to create transformational change that impacts the lives of patients, practice owners, and teams. Each season, we'll focus on one powerful topic, breaking it down with practical strategies, real stories, and tools you can use right away. Let's get into it. Hello, everyone. This is Rachel Wall. Welcome back to the Inspired Hygiene Podcast. This is episode 2 of this season, and this season we are focusing on the powerful partnership, that partnership between dentists and hygienists and how we can mend and heal and grow those relationships even stronger than they've ever been before. And so I am super excited for our guest today. So I am introducing an incredible dynamic duo, Dr. Pam Maragliano and Sarah Crowe. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you for having us. This is so fun.
Thrilled to be here.
Absolutely. So Dr. Pam, you and I have met at different events and things, and also on, I believe it was one of the dental economics webinars or podcasts or something like that over the years. And you have been the chief editor of Dental Economics now for how long?
Oh, goodness. It'll be 5 years in July, which is crazy. The time flies.
That is fantastic. And you have done a fabulous job with that. I always enjoy it. You brought so much life to that and real world experience as well. And you were a hygienist before you went to Tufts Dental School. And then you also, I didn't realize, and I was researching it, that you're a board certified prosthodontist.
I am, yes.
That's fantastic. And where did you do that, your pros training?
At UCLA.
Fantastic. So we have a very, very skilled dentist here with us and hygienist as well. Sarah, you and I have gotten to know each other over the last couple years through Celerant Consulting and a couple different events that we were able to be at together. And you have been a past president of Massachusetts Dental Hygiene Association and even won the Dental Hygienist of the Year award. That's very cool. And then tell us a little bit about, and you're both speakers, educators. Tell us, Sarah, a little bit about your role with EMS and just your shall we say, influence and impact on bringing guided biofilm therapy to the U.S. and really helping teams integrate that. I'd love to hear more about that.
Thank you. That is probably one of my favorite roles of all of my roles. I love being a trainer with EMS because I feel like I can take the experiences that I've had and the shift in my career and share that with everyone that I come in contact with. And so what it looks like is me getting to travel around the country, and I help dental practices integrate guided biofilm therapy into their practice. So it is a full 6-hour hands-on training. I come in, we do 2 hours of theory and science, and then we do 4 hours of hands-on training where hygienists get to work on each other. And gosh, I absolutely love it because I love taking what has really helped me from an ergonomic standpoint, from a patient communication standpoint, and sharing that with my colleagues. It's like my favorite thing.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I want to dig into a little bit more about that, sharing that. That's a huge part of, I think, what we're called to do. And so, Dr. Pam, you two work together in your practice, Salem Dental Arts. Tell us a little bit about the practice. Like, what do you love the most, and how have you, as a hygienist, having been a hygienist, how did that really shape how you built your team, how you built this practice? I'd love to hear a little bit about that.
Oh, my goodness. How far back do you want me to go?
Let's go. Let's go all the way back.
Oh, my goodness. So I bought my practice in 2014, and it was interesting. I was kind of a different dentist at the time. I was still a prosthodontist, and I still, at that time, was lecturing about Canberra and risk management, tooth decay prevention, and all of those things. And so when I bought my practice, I thought, goodness, I am going to have the most preventive oriented practice that the North Shore has ever seen. And what I realized pretty quickly is that I did not, and I did not have the right team in place. And it's not really in my nature to just buy a practice and clean house and fire everybody, that kind of thing. So I sort of made myself uncomfortable for the comfort of everybody around me. And for me, that went on for years. And every year I would meet with my accountant and I wouldn't feel good about how the practice was doing. I loved the dentistry, but like that was sort of it. And during that time, I was actually focusing a lot on lecturing because if I could get out of the practice, I would be out of there as quickly as I could. And it took me the pandemic to have a moment to sit back and think about my practice. And sadly, I realized that the practice I imagined and the practice that I had were two totally different places, and something drastic needed to change. And so I made it so everybody, with the exception of my office manager, had to go away. And we decided to start over. And it started with Sarah. And I felt during that time that, gosh, I'm a middle child. Like people get along with me. I don't know why I'm so uncomfortable to try to, make patients like me. I mean, usually people liking me isn't a problem. And, but there was just still something that wasn't right. And for me, the pandemic really taught me, you know what? I'm just going to be who I am. If patients leave, they go. I don't really care what happens, but I need to do the dentistry that I want to do because at the end of the day, it was still coming from a well-intentioned place. I still wanted to have the best preventive practice on the North Shore, and I still wanted to have the best restorative practice on the North Shore. And you can have both of those, but you need to have the right team in place. And so we kissed a lot of frogs, but it started with Sarah. And so it was one of those things that it was inspiring to bring a hygienist in who was actually excited about dental hygiene. I know it sounds kind of shocking because I'm guessing whoever's listening to this podcast is probably pretty excited about dental hygiene. But I worked with hygienists that really weren't excited about hygiene and perio and risk assessment and getting patients healthy. And when I was a hygienist, I feel like maybe I didn't give my patients the credit that they deserve. And I just assumed everybody had bleeding somewhere, and I was doing my job and they were doing their job if they had less bleeding than, say, the next person that's coming in. But I always expected some blood on my 2x2 by the end of the appointment. And even I don't think I believed that we can truly see clinical health until Sarah joined my practice.
Wow. Well, Sarah, like what was it that really drew you to Dr. Pam's practice and what did you see even in that first maybe interview process that you knew there was something there that could be developed?
I mean, I knew Dr. Pam long before she knew who I was. I actually learned about Dr. Pam listening to a podcast. And I mean, I was excited about dental hygiene. I'm still excited about dental hygiene, but I have literally been listening to dental hygiene podcasts. I feel like before it was a thing, I want to say in 2014 is when I started listening, and I would listen on my way to work to kind of give myself something, insight for the day or get myself psyched up for the day. And I remember listening to this woman who came on. I was intrigued that she was a dental hygienist before she became a board certified prosthodontist. And I just thought that was so impressive. And I remember listening to her speak, and I remember her talking about caryology and talking about caries. And I would find myself finishing her sentences in the car as I was driving. And so I knew, I was like, wow, I really resonate with everything that she says. And I thought she was some very like fairy tale dentist that lived in a far, far away land. I actually thought she was practicing in California, but that's because she went to school in California. But little did I know she was practicing in the town next to where I was practicing. And I couldn't believe it. And so finally, I had the opportunity when I found out that she was hiring during 2020, when, all of dentistry was up in the air. I have to say, I was okay where I was working before. Everything, is hindsight in 2020, but there was a pun there, if you saw what I did. But in 2020, when Dr. Pam needed a hygienist, I literally just up and quit my job. I was not looking for another job. I was not planning to go anywhere else. But as soon as I heard Dr. Pam was looking for a hygienist, I up and quit my job and I went and worked with her. And I can tell you what I have gotten there as a hygienist from a support standpoint is like nothing you'll ever see in any practice. And I can say that because not only do I coach practices and see lots of dental hygiene teams, I also temped for a really long time. And I was able to work inside of 30 different dental practices in Massachusetts. And so I really have a good feel of what a good team looks like, what good support looks like, what good dentistry looks like. And I feel like I hit the jackpot, and I have all of that at Salem Dental Arts. So it's been great.
That's awesome. I love that. So I mean, Sarah, just from what I know of your team, your hygiene team there at Salem Dental Arts, you all, I would say, and I mean this sincerely, you're in the top, I would say 2 to 3% of dental hygiene teams from the perspective of your continual learning and embracing new technologies, deploying, new products and making sure the science is behind it, and then sharing and teaching it with others. So what is it that makes, you talked about Dr. Pam supporting you. What is it that makes that partnership so supportive what are the real life things that are happening and the dynamics between Dr. Pam? I know Dr. Novi works in the practice as well now, and you have a team of hygienists. Like what is that day-to-day dynamic that creates that powerful partnership and makes you all appreciate each other so much?
I would say it's the little things. It's all of the little things that add up to the big things. And I also think it's important because, maybe what doesn't work, maybe what works in our practice might not work in another practice. And I think what Dr. Pam is really good at, and I have to give a shout out to our office manager, Brittany, who is also amazing. Her support is above reproach. But I think that she's a prosthodontist, right? She was a former dental hygienist. She has attention to detail. And so looking at each of the team members and asking yourself, well, what is their sort of love language? What is their workplace love language? How do they personally feel supported? And so when you're able to identify what your team needs from you to feel supported and to feel appreciated, then you're able to give them that in that fashion so they truly feel like they are part of the team and that they are valued. And she's excellent at doing all of that.
So, okay, so Dr. Pam, that some dentists hear that and they're like, oh my gosh, it's all I can do to kind of keep the day together and keep moving along. And I'm guessing that you and Brittany probably work together to kind of brainstorm some of those ways to acknowledge the team. But yeah, I'd love to hear what's an example of maybe something that you've noticed that's really meant a lot to a team member or the team as a whole.
So there's so many things actually. One of my predominant requirements for working with me is I want people who want to be there. I think that if you have to wake up and you dread coming in every day, you don't belong in this practice. And so we have everybody who, I mean, obviously we have some days where they're not great days, like personally or, whatever. But for the most part, if you can wake up and look forward to spending your day with your team, with your patients, with your boss, you're pretty much setting yourself up for a good day. And so for me, I really felt it was important that whoever works here has to want to work here. It really has to be the right fit, whether it's, the fit with the team and everything else. Fortunately, what goes really nicely with that is a self-starter mentality, an excited, mentality about dental hygiene, about dentistry, about technology, about products, about patients and their health and oral systemic health and all of the things. So that it's interesting. I work all the time, but I also don't work all the time. I feel like I don't need to micromanage anybody on my team because I trust them. And there's a mutual trust and respect there that I don't need to look over Sarah's shoulder to see if she airflowed every little bit of, triplaque ID off the tooth. It's like, that's not a thing in our practice because I trust her. And, and we don't have to sit there and waste our time on things that I don't have to think about, because that's the kind of relationship that we have. And so that's something I personally appreciate, because I have multiple jobs and my dogs come to work now. And there's all of these things that are crazy in the practice that I don't have to do that. And so I also feel that, I work with, yes, technically they're my employees, but they're my friends. I feel like I really do like and admire and respect and love everybody that works at Salem Dental Arts. And it's a pleasure for me to celebrate them and celebrate their wins and, send them a text when I see that they're, developing a skill or doing something different or had a great day or needs a little boost, or, if, something comes up and it's, like an opportunity to give a present, or, something that, an acknowledgement or a work anniversary or a birthday, those are just kind of sprinkles on top. I think it's the day-to-day enjoyment. I look forward to Sarah coming in, and I look forward to the mornings and, lunchtimes and after work when we can actually catch up and chat, because I like them. I like everybody. And so I feel like it makes a nice dynamic for not only autonomy and trust, but also a team approach. There's nothing in this practice that anybody is above doing. And so I'll clean a toilet, I'll, get on the floor and do whatever, if somebody, there's times when I walk by and I'm like, I see Sarah's little light on. I'm like, what do you need? I'll help you, and vice versa. Sarah's come in and watched me do restorative procedures. I mean, so there's really nothing that anybody's like, not my job. And I think that makes the whole work environment so much more pleasurable.
Well, man, I heard so many things in there. So, Dr. Pam, because you're willing to do those things too, any job that's in the office, you've set an example of what is expected with teamwork. And so I know that, Sarah knows that, but I think that's one thing specifically to call out, is leading by example. So, there's not anything that you're expecting your team to do that you wouldn't do yourself, whether that is having a tough conversation with the patient, whether that is, staying a little bit later to get all the notes and everything finished, or, coming in a little early because somebody broke a tooth and they've got a wedding the next day. Whatever it is, you're not asking your team to do anything that you wouldn't be willing to do, is what I'm hearing. And just setting that teamwork, and the fact that you said, we really enjoy working together. I listened to a podcast recently, and I hope I'm saying this right. I think it was the Dental Economist show, which I think is the CEO of Denticon runs that. It's very good podcast. And he interviewed, I think I'm getting this episode right. The guest in the episode is Pat Bauer, who is the CEO of Heartland Dental. And he said, look, when we interview folks to partner with them in their practice, if they're rude, the deal's off. Like, we're just not going any further. Like, we don't want to work with jerks. I haven't started cussing on this podcast yet, so I just kind of kept it at that, but it's probably only a matter of time. We don't want to work with jerks. We want to work with nice people who are going to enjoy working together, because, hey, guess what? We spend a lot of time at work. And this is it seems so obvious, that thing, but it's a huge thing that folks are struggling with. I know early on, Sarah, you and I had a conversation, or we were on some panel or something together, and the topic of practice culture came up. And everyone in the practice is responsible, right, for honoring that culture. And I think there are, unfortunately, because of certain circumstances within the industry or certain communities or whatever is, I think there are a lot of people that are working with people that they just don't care for. And that's really unfortunate. And so I would say the message is, it doesn't have to be that way. Yeah, it doesn't have to be that way. Now, that means that if I want to be somewhere that I enjoy, I have to be a person that's willing to be enjoyable, right? It goes both ways. Yeah. Anything you want to add to that, Tara?
Yeah, no, it is. It's absolutely very true. And that's the thing, it's like you do tend to attract like-minded people, right? So it's like it's the vibe attracts your tribe, right? Your vibe attracts your tribe. And, Dr. Pam talked about how she doesn't micromanage us, right? And she doesn't need to micromanage us. And we don't necessarily want to be micromanaged, right? I think that when you have trust between providers and you have an environment where people are happy, I think if you bring in maybe another hygienist that hasn't really experienced anything like that before, but sort of has it in them, it's like eventually people will sort of catch your attitude, kind of like they catch your cold just by being close to you. And so we have evolved into, I think, this team that continuously attracts like-minded, high-achieving people with this excellence mindset. So, yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And while Dr. Pam doesn't micromanage you, I'm sure you all have clear standards of care, right? You all have agreed upon certain diagnostic parameters, screenings that you do. What is the threshold when somebody moves from one type of treatment to another? Like all of that is there. And then if you're working within those boundaries, like go for it. Make those decisions.
Absolutely. And that's the other thing that I really love about working at Salem Dental Arts and working with a doctor who, we share the same philosophies, is that when you have, as a hygienist, when you have the autonomy and the freedom to do what you feel is the best intent for that patient, and you have all the support, you have the technology, you have the clinical support, you have the doctor's blessing. I mean, there's no stopping you from doing everything you can to make your patients healthy. And so I think the biggest problem where hygienists and dentists don't share like-minded philosophies is when, a hygienist has to put down their own opinions and just do what the doctor wants them to do, because it's the doctor's practice and they get to pick the products and they get to pick what happens with the patients. And when a hygienist has to succumb to that, you do just kind of feel like a puppet, right? You don't feel like a healthcare provider, and that you are going to work to do what you were trained to do in dental hygiene school. You feel like you're just going to work to please your employer. And that leads to burnout, and that leads to dissatisfaction of your career.
Yeah.
I would also argue that it leads to poor productivity. It leads to poor treatment plan acceptance or any sort of care acceptance, whether it's dental hygiene or restorative. It also leads to, we think patients don't see what's happening. It's really interesting that, especially having my practice for as long as I have, and I've been through different employees, I've been through personal struggles, different things. Patients have an idea of what's going on. When you hit 5, 10 more years in a practice, your patients start to get to know you guys. And they know if the dynamic's off, and they know when there's tension. We think they don't, but they do. And that also impacts the patient experience and patients' trust in us as healthcare providers. We can't be arguing about scaling and root planing in front of a patient when there's an obvious perio chart in front of us. It's craziness. We shouldn't be. And
Yeah.
I think that there's a lot there that it doesn't just impact, nothing impacts just one person. It impacts the entire practice.
Mm-hmm. And I think you said it best yourself, Dr. Pam, when you were talking about how when you had your practice originally before you fired your entire team, that you would make yourself uncomfortable for the comfort of everyone else, and how that made you feel as a practice owner. And it's the same thing as a hygienist. If you're feeling like you're just doing this to make everybody else comfortable, you get that same feeling as a hygienist. So, yeah, interesting dynamic there.
That's really, I want to dig into how do we overcome that. So, but the other piece that is obvious, but I want to state it specifically, is that that type of practice culture where the hygienist just feels like they're, they have to kind of follow the program, the patients are not getting the clinical care that they deserve, because there is a philosophical block, and it's not always intentional. I mean, I think it's rarely intentional. I think it is a lack of communication, a lack of knowing how to start the conversation. So that would be my question to the two of you, from a dentist perspective and a hygienist perspective. If that's going on and that tension is there, what's the first step to clear the air and kind of get to a better place, in your opinion?
I think it depends on the love language of the dentist, because at the end of the day, it depends on where the breakdown is. I have actually, believe it or not, plenty of friends that want a really thriving hygiene department, but they don't have hygienists that care enough. So I really think it depends on who cares more and how do you get the other one on board. I would say there's no dentist that likes to do bloody dentistry. So whether it's, a composite that's being treatment planned, or an aesthetic case that's being treatment planned, or anything that we're doing, if those patients are bleeding, trust me, they're going to be struggling in their operatory as a dentist. So maybe that's a place to start. I would say find a problem and offer a solution to solve it. And the answer isn't I need sharp instruments, because that's not really getting to the why you need sharp instruments, or why you need a certain technology, or why you need something. I think if you say, if I had this would happen, or, this patient really needs a crown. And if we had a intraoral camera so they could see what we would see, patients would say yes to the care that we're recommending. I mean, whatever that is, I think that kind of identifying the problem and offering a solution, I think would go so much further than, oh, Dr. Pam's too cheap, she'd never do that, let's just, talk smack about her during lunch. I think that there's definitely better ways to go about doing it.
I think that's great advice. Sarah, what about for you? What do you think?
Yeah, I would totally agree. I would absolutely agree. I think having the conversation, just having the conversation, because what happens in hygiene is, you're back to back patients all day, right? You have very little time in between patients, if any at all. And there's no time. And the thought that you had on your second patient in the morning about talking to the doctor, today's going to be the day, I'm going to make sure I make an appointment with the doctor to talk to them. Well, by patient 7, you forgot. Or maybe the doctor left and you didn't know they were leaving early for the day. And so you just kind of go to the next day. And then the next day becomes the next day. And then you just kind of bury it deep. And then you never have the conversation. And it's like the elephant in the room that nobody's talking about. And that's where I feel like we are today. So I feel like it would be prioritizing having the really hard conversation that you've always wanted to have. That would be step 1 for me.
And what is the Nelson Mandela? I don't lose, I only win, or I learn. So we can learn from our approach. We can learn from the response that we receive and how that worked. And I'm with you. I think the more timely and specific you can make those types of feedback, either way, right? Whether it's doctor to hygienist or hygienist to doctor, the better. And the more you can have specific examples. So for example, if a doctor walks out and they're like, man, that crown took twice as long, that patient was bleeding like crazy. Go look at that patient's chart. What's the status of, like, let's do a little research here, and then let's use that. We're like, okay, ding, ding. I have, this is my moment, say, hey, I have an idea. Um, we, we really could be doing a lot better with our periodontal diagnosis. And that is going to make your job easier. It's going to make my job easier. And I'm not exactly sure how to fix this, but I know that we can do this. And maybe, they listen to the Inspired Hygiene podcast, they call Inspired Hygiene, or, they reach out to talk about GBT, whatever that might be. There's a lot of help out there. And a lot of times teams are really frustrated and they just don't know that it can be better. And you all are a shining example of that it absolutely can be, if you are willing to really communicate and really develop and build that culture of support and positivity and excellence. I know that is kind of a cheesy word, but that's really what it is you're continually learning how to deliver that type of care. So from your point of view and your experience, what do you feel like is the next step? I mean, we talked about this powerful partnership, this hygienist dentist relationship from your perspective in the practice. Now let's pan out and kind of think about it from the industry and what so many are experiencing right now on both, from both dentist and hygienist perspective. What do you think is the next step that hygienists and dentists can take to really start to mend those relationships?
I don't think we're done shuffling. I think that hygienists are still going to be looking for that opportunity that's going to allow them the autonomy that they deserve and the culture that they're seeking, or the flexibility in their schedule, or just the appreciation that they deserve. So I don't think we're done yet. Everybody finding their dental home. I feel like we played like 52 card pickup and we're not quite done yet with that.
Yeah.
I will also say that it comes down to communication. I think that just like any relationship, if you're not communicating, it's probably not a healthy relationship. And if you're communicating and the communication, there's a breakdown or there's a barrier or that respect isn't mutual, perhaps it's time to find a place that will provide you what you're looking for. And same for the employers looking for a hygienist. I mean, gosh, it's really hard right now. I mean, we're actually hiring right now as well, but again, we're like, we don't want any hygienist. We want somebody that's going to, fit with the standard of care that we've become so accustomed to in our practice. So we're like looking, but like not that hard, because we know that it's going to be a diamond that we're looking for. And it's just hard. And I think that in some cases, it's just hard right now in this time period. And I think that eventually, as we ride this out, and hopefully we need more dental hygiene schools, I think we do need more hygienists in this world. At least in Boston, we've got so many dental schools and we're not seeing as many hygienists around. I think that there's still a lot to be had for communication. And, one thing, not to like get off topic, but it is a little soapbox topic for me, is it always baffled me that in dental school, they never talked about the abilities of the team. And I remember going to one of my faculty members and saying, when are you going to talk about how to utilize your dental hygienist? And they were like, what? And I was like, well, how you work with your dental hygienist or your dental assistants, like what's their role in the dental practice? And their answer was, you're in dental school. And so while it's very easy to criticize the dentist and it's easy for us as dentists to criticize the hygienists, I think in some cases, I say this as respectfully as possible, there's just a level of ignorance there. We just don't know what the other is capable of and, all of the value that they bring. And so I think that, again, it comes down to having an open mind, really listening, seeing how you can rely on your hygienist. My life is better because of my hygienists. My practice is better because of my hygienists. My restorative outcomes are better because of my hygienists. And it's a partnership. I mean, my bigger restorative cases go back and forth between me and hygiene all the time. And I get to be like a snob now. I don't even treat people if they're bleeding, because why would I? I don't have to. It doesn't have to be that way. But I do think that, in some instances, there's some education that has to come with the communication.
Absolutely. Communication, understanding, and education for sure. Sarah, what do you think? What, from your point of view, what's the next step for hygienists and dentists to come together? And because it really is, it is in the best interest of everyone and the patients and community that we serve. What's the next step to mend that relationship?
I would really love to see hygienists really step into their role, because I could not be more proud to be a dental hygienist. And I think probably, the demographic that is listening to this podcast is also very excited and has stepped into their role. But for the majority of hygienists, I want to see everybody level up. Let's step into our role as preventative health specialists, because I could not be more proud of the fact that, dental hygienists, we are literally one of the last preventative health professions left in our industry, right? Everybody else treats people once they're already sick, once there's already disease. And we have such a responsibility to prevent those diseases. And there's very few industries that do that. And I couldn't be more proud to be a hygienist because of that. And so I would love to see hygienists grow in their confidence and act like the healthcare providers that we were taught to be.
I think that is a beautiful way to wrap this up. In the last episode, we talked about that invitation. So that is a perfect way for us to wrap this, because I could not agree with you more. Thank you both so much. This was so fun. We'll have to do this again sometime. And I think the cat's out of the bag now. You might just get some phone calls from some very excited hygienists. So I'm like, I can't wait to hear about the results of that.
Bring it on.
Give us a call. Oh, Sarah.
I love it. Thank you both so much. Thanks, everyone. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Inspired Hygiene Podcast. We hope you got a ton of value and some things that you can really take away and implement now. So as always, we invite you, if we can help you in any way to optimize your hygiene department, head on over to inspiredhygiene.com. And as always, stay inspired.